Welcome to Costly Conversations. I'm super excited because we have Flight from Arm Your Friends. What's going on, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show. Finally glad to tap in.
Absolutely, bro. So real quick, just a quick matter of housekeeping. If you are interested in jumping in and supporting the show, please go ahead and check out the Patreon, the Discord channel. We have awesome little community in there, and Flight said he was interested in coming in and having a private conversation probably after the fact. So if you guys want to hop in and see something like that and engage in that kind of way, come on, join the Patreon group, hop in and let's keep it costly. So let's just jump right into it, man. What's going on, Flight? How are you, bro?
I'm good. I'm busy. In addition to running Arm Your Friends, I actually work full time in the tech industry. So, I'm always on the move doing something or working on some project. Yeah. Blessed to be here, feeling good. Glad to be, talking about what we're doing here.
So I know you said Arm Your Friends, and some people actually might have no idea what that is. Can we talk about what Arm Your Friends is currently?
Yeah. So current is, I think, the key word there, because Arm Your Friends has been a lot of different things at a lot of different times to a lot of different people. And right now, our main focus is being a company that promotes training and community accessibility to marginalized groups who want to get into the firearms training space. And marginalized can mean a number of different things, but we're mostly focused on bringing in young people, Black people, women, especially women of color, into the shooting community and providing a space where they can feel like they have a community where they belong, where they can advance their skills and gain knowledge and meet other people who want to train, who feel the same ways that they do.
Okay. Yeah. So let's address the elephant in the room, because I mean, you said what you said, and you wanted to make a shooting community, more or less, or club in a sense, where people can get together, train, learn, grow your skills. Forgive me if I butchered any of that, or stop me if I, okay. And, but in the recent past, Arm Your Friends has been seen as, called, positioned as, maybe not intentionally, as some sort of far left, socialist, militant, militia type group who is more interested in, let's say, like the LGBTQIA plus agenda more than firearms. And
so a few things to kind of contextualize there. One, our goal is to be very inclusive to the LGBTQIA plus community, because from our perspective, you protect the Second Amendment and you protect your right to do things by having a broader base of support. Because the vast majority of the people in those communities and across most communities have the same common interest as us, which is ensuring their self-defense, ensuring their ability to protect themselves, because they come from communities, or most communities in the United States aren't actually traditionally firearm owning. So most people are drawing firearms for the same reason, which is the ability to protect themselves, their loved ones, their communities. But previously, we did gain a reputation kind of from the onset of being quote unquote far left. I don't think we ever intended to go down that route specifically, but our origin story does come from 2020 during the George Floyd protests, when I think a lot of us shared the common sentiment that, one, the system in its current configuration isn't automatically and de facto there to protect you. Like, if you just think about it from the perspective of during, even today, police response times in a metro area like Houston, where I live. Houston, you might get a 7-minute response time. Depending on the time of year, you might not even get a response time at all if the crime isn't significant enough. And then if you look at where I live, specifically in Houston, I live in a traditionally like black area, one of the first black communities in Houston. No, actually, the first black community in Texas, the first incorporated like black settlement in Texas. And the police presence and the community police relationship hasn't always been great, but that creates an opportunity where people still want to be safe, but can't always immediately rely on, centralized, policing to keep them safe, to keep themselves safe. The same way that all Texans say, in this house, we don't call 911. Sometimes you can call 911 and it's not going to be there fast enough to protect you. Or even interested in, that song by J. Cole, he says, what's it called? Wet Dreams by J. Cole, where he says, I came fast like 911 to white neighborhoods. Yeah, it's kind of like that, but the opposite, where if you live in a neighborhood like this, the police might be slower to arrive to where you are.
So you're saying, at least according to what you know, the police response times just not good when it comes to your neighborhood and neighborhoods like your neighborhood, minority, black neighborhoods and such, and meaning that you need to take your self-defense into your own hands often, or that may be the scenario. You can't trust that the government's going to just respond.
Exactly. So we kind of try to tie our values and our perspective and our mission into like the merchandise we drop. And one of the most recent collections that we released was called No One Is Coming to Save Us.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the kind of theme. If you look at American history, there have been plenty of times where it would have been nice to have a centralized set of good guys who are coming to your rescue immediately. But it's part of acknowledging being a person is acknowledging that like part of human nature is to know that if you're scared, other people are scared too. And you inviting a different scared person to solve your problem, they might not ever come. And without just spending this whole time just bagging on the police, I don't know if you've looked at a lot of the police officers in your area, but a lot of them aren't what you'd imagine that you'd want being your first responder to an emergency situation when your family's life is on the line. I mean, I'm not here to brag on myself, but I've been to the range where there are, local police doing their trainings, doing their refreshers. I take my shot above theirs every day, all day and all night. Especially when you look at the qualification standards for most police departments, there's a chance that you are better off ensuring your own protection rather than hoping that they're going to get there on time, have excellent response time to be able to break down the situation and to get shots on target in an emergency.
Right.
Under.
Yeah, no, we actually just had a conversation with a former police officer who's in this content creation space, 2A space as well. And he was letting us know, a lot of guys are kind of the sloppy Joe of the world. Just their belts all loose, their guns flopping in the wind. He didn't mention this, but there's a great chance that they're morbidly obese. It's just a reality of a lot of people. And I'm not trying to attack people who maybe their health isn't the best at this moment, but that plays a big factor if you have to wrestle with a crazy drunk guy or somebody loaded up on PCP. I would take the guy on PCP 10 out of 10 just because, you know what those drugs do to the system. But also, if you're not physically fit, you're going to die, as old Grand Thumb said.
I absolutely am a huge proponent of that. And there's a lot of, I'd say, we've actually run into some issues in building an inclusive environment in Arm Your Friend, which means we do want to be inclusive to people of different body types when it comes to your self-defense. But when it comes to the self-defense world, there are two kind of categories. You have to think of immediate self-defense and then community defense. And self-defense, the only skill set, if your only interest in self-defense is immediate body, my immediate family self-defense, that is the ability to draw from concealment and rattle off 5 shots at a target at 7.5 meters or less. That's the only skill set you really need for true self-defense, in addition to de-escalation and non-lethals. But really think about that area of operation as being like 7.5. But then there's community defense. And that's where you say, okay, I need to be able to respond to a situation that might be outside of my immediate area that I'm occupying, and be able to be a value add, to be a value adding asset, to respond quickly, calmly, professionally. And that requires a degree of physical fitness, mental preparedness, and professionalism that no one should apologize for holding people to, if that's what they say they want to be. So even for like yourself or myself, you train with a rifle, you train with your plate carrier, you train with all this gear to say, okay, if there's an emergency, these are tools in my toolbox for how to respond. If that's how you see yourself and that's how you see your role in your community, you have an obligation to the people that you're trying to protect to be as fit, mentally present, and professional as possible in your conduct and training.
I would say you're very correct, and anyone who has an issue with that,
I don't want you coming to my defense.
Right? Like, come on, man. Like, be as ready as possible. And oftentimes, you know, if you end up having to chase somebody down, and at the end of the day, you're just so winded that you can't, you know, put your hands up to protect yourself. Like, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me? And I'm not trying to say that, you know, bad stuff doesn't happen. You know, you can't be hurt, but if you can't overcome simple obstacles such as, you know, a 50-meter sprint, I'm not sure why I would call you regarding, you know, police, military, people like that. And then, of course, if you claim to be a self-defender that wants to go beyond your self-defense, you definitely probably should take it to the next level when it comes to making sure you remain hydrated, that you know, put some level of effort into your personal fitness. But I did want to get back to this assumption, and allow you to clear the air, because you actually did an interview, or like a mini documentary, with a publication. Feel free to name them.
And based out of France.
Out of France, and they've done some cool pieces, and I feel like their quality level is lovely. However, they painted you guys immediately as the interview was happening, leftist gun group, or I'm misquoting them, but they explicitly referred to Arm Your Friends as a leftist group,
which we also specifically asked them not to do. So, addressing that entire situation, they came to us telling us that they wanted to tell our story, and there were so many elements that ended up on the cutting room floor, and there were so many places where they requested our feedback. In fact, the specific title, and of course there are receipts for this. This isn't some he said, she said this. There's an email thread and a text thread of us going back and forth where they asked us how we would describe ourselves. And they asked us, would you describe yourselves as a leftist gun group? And we said, no, we would describe ourselves as a community that wants to increase firearms training and adoption amongst Black people, people of color, the LGBTQIA plus community, young people, and people who might be politically left of center. That encompasses a wide array of people. So when you use that specific word leftist versus something like liberal or left of center, it's designed to evoke a specific emotional response that on the internet is going to get you clicks. When the vast majority of our response, or like the people who come to us, come from a specific group called liberal gun owners. But if you want to get very specific about like the language we use to describe political theory, there's a big difference between saying this is a quote unquote liberal group or a leftist group, of which we identify as neither. We're a group that welcomes the people without our mission being partisan or inherently U.S. party politics based. We don't get on here giving rants about who you should vote for in the next election.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really talk about elections or United States domestic policy like that. But we wanted to create a place where people with views that weren't kind of traditional in the gun space could also feel welcome, so that they don't just have to not get proper training because they feel like they might disagree politically with the current infrastructure.
So I hear what you're saying, and I'm wondering, this probably should be a quick question and answer. Would you welcome into the group somebody who maybe leans more right of center and is proud of it in a sense?
Yeah, so it depends on the specific views of the person. Okay, actually, let me rewind that. I'll train with anybody who's interested in furthering. The first part of my statement was increasing the training opportunities for Black people, women of color, and providing an inclusive environment for people who might not necessarily agree with like their worldviews as well. But if you're interested in saying the Second Amendment is for everyone, therefore we want to train with everyone, I'll hear you out. Like, I'm not in the game of telling people, you know, you're allowed to be here, you're allowed to be in my spaces if you disagree with me. Because I feel like one of the best things you can do for any community is to foster conversations with people who you don't necessarily agree with on every topic. I don't agree with anyone on every topic. There are people who, like, I could give you a 20-minute rant about everything that I hate about Joe Biden right now, and then an equivalent length rant about everything that I hate about Donald Trump and like everyone who works like with him as well. So it's not so much about what your specific views are when it comes to big capital P politics, as long as you share the mission of bringing more people into the Second Amendment community and making individuals safer.
So you would say the group is attempting to be apolitical. However, because of the demographics you cater to, it can be seen as more left, or let's clear that up right now.
Yeah, so I would say because of where we started and because of like our values, we are a more left-leaning group, and that's where we've been. But to identify and label ourselves in some binaries like left or explicitly one thing is not like our mission here. Our mission is not to further some political agenda of anybody. It's to get people trained.
Okay.
I feel like even in our case, I don't feel like people go ask, like I can't tell you the specific political views of most firearms instructors. Most firearms instructors are here to say, I'm here to get you trained, or I'm here to build a range day that gets people into training. So the thing that I want people to take away from their experience at Arm Your Friends is I met people who were like me, looked like me, around my age, were cool to be around, and made me feel welcome as a young person, Black person, woman of color, member of the LGBT community, and as someone who might not necessarily agree with you on everything politically.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I'm assuming we'll get more questions. And if you guys do have questions, are you accessible, or how can people reach you?
Yeah, I do my best to be responsive on Instagram. That's my main platform. I post on Twitter occasionally, but if you reach out to the Arm Your Friends page, the team and I, we run that. And my personal Instagram, you can always shoot me a message. I do my best to respond, but I'm not that great at it.
Yeah, I know.
I'm trying.
It's good. So we're going to continue on with the interview, and thank you for sharing that piece, because people want to know, like, you know, this group or things is a leftist group. And if you go on places like the most toxic place on the internet, Reddit, you're going to see a lot of different opinions, or a lot of different positions that people assume AYF has, and got to hear from the horse's mouth, as this saying goes. Now, 2020. What happened in 2020? I know you said that's when AYF kind of was formed, in a sense.
Yeah.
What happened in
So
2020?
I wish I had some of this stuff up on the original Instagram. There was so many different things happening. One, we're at the height of the pandemic. Two, it was right after, George Floyd's murder. And a lot of people, myself included, were questioning their relationship to their ability to protect or defend themselves. When you see, what city are you in again?
Tyler, East
Okay,
Texas.
so I'm not sure what things were like in Tyler, but there was this really eerie moment where I was talking with all my friends on the group chat, and there were protests going down in like the city of Houston. And if you were following the news, you would see that there were the unarmed Reaper drones like flying. The what are they called? The MQ series drones that are owned by the Border Patrol
Really?
for border surveillance that were then retasked by Homeland Security to monitor protests. That's an insane feeling because the difference between an unarmed, surveillance drone and an armed drone on a military base is what, a couple of weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months. In addition to seeing the footage on the news of MRAPs up and down the streets, like mine-resistant ambush protected vehicles up and down the streets, and then hearing that there was an increase of like actual like armed groups on like whatever side of the spectrum like you believe in politically, but there were various different armed groups like patrolling streets at different times.
Right.
So I think a lot of us, myself included, felt like there has to be a way to ensure that my safety is protected if I don't believe that, one, the police have the ability to protect me at all times, and to know that in an emergency, like in the true Houston city limits proper, where there's the billion-dollar buildings that they're assigned to protect, what of my security then? Like, what of my priority then? Like, where do I rank in that priority order? I don't have private security. I don't have bodyguards. I don't have people looking out for my specific interests. So your only option is to be at the mercy of the state or learn how to protect yourself.
Right.
So that's kind of the initial feeling that drove us to start saying we need community and we need to be putting on events and range days where people can train together and feel comfortable enough to train with each other.
Yeah. So one thing that you'd mentioned is that there were armed groups, and back in the day, 2020, not so long ago, Antifa was getting a lot of shine. And then there were whatever counter groups to them getting involved as well. One, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you might assess more blame to one side or the other. But I suppose my question is, do you feel that you personally were actually in danger from, I suppose, any of these groups that were protesting or rioting or counter-protesting or counter-rioting, or maybe feel like, if you look at Seattle, you look at the what did they call it? Chaz. Did you feel that you were in some sort of imminent danger like that? Or did you think, well, perhaps something weird might happen. There might be a road blocked and I might not be able to get home. What was your mindset? What scenario were you thinking about?
I think the overall scenario in my mind was one in which, I like to say I'm a believer of the idea that anything can happen at any time. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there was a specific group that I had in mind when I said you need to be able to protect yourself. But if you look at, I'm not sure if these blog posts are still available because we just transitioned our website. In the broader context, being Black in America means that your position of safety is not always guaranteed, like at all. So some of the stories that I like to reference are like the most key story that I like to reference is the idea of Black Wall Street, the Tulsa, Oklahoma bombing in 1921. So that's a situation in which a mostly Black community was thriving and prospering and somewhat autonomous in its own ways and had its own local economy where, things were going well for them. And then due to, I guess you could say, false accusations and misunderstandings and games of telephone being played back and forth, it caused the neighboring white residential area to decide that the Black area needed to be destroyed. And everything from firebombs dropped from biplanes, which was pretty much an experimental method at this point that was just learned during World War I, was deployed against like this city where Tulsa is now like a very low percentage Black compared to what it was in 1921. Then you look at the history of like the whole period of time, like when the Klan was running rampant between also the 1920s up until the 1960s, various bombings, various thises, various that's, of actual political terror being enacted against like Black communities everywhere. So it's not to say that there was a specific moment in which I thought that my house or the exact area that I lived was going to be attacked. I feel like the entire period of time was a wake-up call that there aren't as many people who are assigned to maintain order as there are people who would love to see you and your family destroyed and decimated by firebombs and like Molotov cocktails if necessary. And there is no good reason why, looking at the overall history of America, why you should expect the police to protect you from such a scenario, regardless of like who you vote for, regardless of what you believe. If you are betting on calling 911 and getting a competent response to solve all of your problems from immediate danger, you should reconsider your studies of American history. It's not something you can consistently depend on, because it's never been there. The time of relative security that we live in, like post 2000, is recent. It's not the status quo for the rest of the world, for one, and then even in American history, we're living in the most peaceful time of American history, but also students of history know that history is cyclical. You can't bank on the present being what it is, for the rest of history.
Mm-hmm. And I can definitely appreciate you acknowledging that the rest of the world tends to not even be as peaceful, period, as it is in kind of Western society, and the States here. And in addition to that, yes, the U.S. has made a lot of strides. I would say that the U.S. has made strides. If you look into even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 35 years ago, you have serious cases of blatant racism and just miscarriages of justice in the most raw and unadulterated forms. And it's in your parents' lifetime. And if you're old enough, in your lifetime.
Yeah.
There's people from that era that are still alive who have intentionally set people up, harmed people, used their power and influence to frame individuals. There's been multiple and some extremely high profile. You can watch movies on it and people say, oh, yeah, movies are movies. Well, no, a lot of these movies are based on true stories and you can do the research. And so I would say, yes, we are living in probably the best time to be alive, especially as a person of color, Black dudes. However, it wasn't that long ago that things were kind of dangerous. And in fact, it's kind of yesterday in a sense. Even as you talk about the George Floyd situation there, I'm sure there's going to be somebody who will be like, well, George Floyd killed himself. more or less, because they
Yeah.
think that way.
So my perspective on that is like the job of the state, like my belief and my opinion on the relationship between the state and its citizens is you should be able to be a horrendous person. Like, I'm not making this as a theoretical example, but you can be a bad person, a person who deserves every bit of what violence befalls you based off the choices that you live in life. And if you encounter another citizen who protects themselves from you, what happens to you happens to you. But when it comes to agents, employees of the state, whose job it is to maintain order, their role is to arrest you and put you in front of a jury of your peers, and to go above and beyond to ensure that the people who pass judgment upon you is a group of your peers. And anything short of that should be eyed with extreme skepticism, and the benefit of the doubt should be given to other citizens to say, if like what could have been done to have made sure that this person lived to trial. Because the good thing about a trial, even in our flawed system, is at least you said we made an attempt at, making sure that due process occurred, even though it's not perfect. But I did want to hop onto another thing really quick.
Sure.
People probably don't know about me. I've done exactly one Instagram post about it ever. I was born in the United States. I was born actually pretty close to Tyler. I was born in Longview, Texas.
Oh yeah, it's not too far from here.
So that's where I was born, and I was born here because my parents are immigrants who came from Zimbabwe in the early 90s, about 92, 93 is when they came.
Okay, so first generation African American.
Yeah, so first generation over here. And the thing about my parents, my father was born in 1965, my mother was born in 1969, which means they were born essentially subjects of the British monarchy. But the story of Zimbabwe is kind of complicated in the sense that, like, the monarchy just up and dipped. They said, like, oh, we're abandoning a lot of our African colonies, which means they essentially handed over the keys to the kingdom to Rhodesia. And if you don't know what Rhodesia is essentially and people don't know this, people just put on Rhodey camo and say, oh, I'm Blood Diamond now. Okay, have fun with that. It's essentially, think about the apartheid government of South Africa. It's the same thing. It was an apartheid state where black people were second-class citizens, and don't let anyone tell you any differently, that like black people preferred to live under Rhodesia, in a state where you're a second-class citizen, because the idea that someone's going to tell me that it's better for a people to be a second-class citizen come on, we're not even going to go there. But the whole point why I bring that up is to say my parents were alive in their lifetime during a civil war and a revolution, during the 1970s, ending in 1980. So these things are farther away for like Americans who are, multi-generation, parents been here since the Revolutionary War.
Right.
But my dad would tell me stories about how from his backyard in Zimbabwe, they'd sit in a tree and they were able to watch fighter jets squaring off like miles away from their backyards.
It's like crazy.
Yeah, it's a crazy notion. And then knowing that my grandfather was like, an adult at that time, like a full-fledged adult, hearing these stories makes you realize humans aren't that advanced. We're still very much fighting wars that are just a generation removed for us. Over ideas that seem as fundamental and like unmovable as living in an apartheid state. That's an idea that's like miles away from me, or like it's unfathomable to believe that's possible.
Something that maybe certain people can identify a little bit closer with is you look at like the Armenian genocide that happened not long ago, and the effects of it continue. and we have what your parents went through, and then we have even what the U.S. engaged in for years in the Middle East and in
Right.
parts of Africa, and it's like, wow, we really do engage in this warfare, and we send our kids over there to be involved, and they come back kind of messed up. Maybe they're better for it, but I think most people end up a bit messed up.
Yeah.
Nightmares and PTSD.
Right. Like,
And we still can't imagine.
that's the reality of the world we live in. So like when people ask me like, what's the onus for starting Arm Your Friends? It's like a lot of different feelings that are, this isn't really a new idea, I'd say. This is just a continuation of like a human tradition. Like the ability to pursue readiness and to get ready and to pursue self-defense and community defense is a natural human impulse that takes shape and reinvents itself over and over and over again. So when I'm 40, 50, 60, I 100% expect and demand that a new generation of like 20-year-olds and like recent college students is going to start something that I look at and say, hey, that's exactly what I was doing when I was like 23. Because this is just like the ability to pursue and seek self-defense and to seek self-reliance is like just a foundational American like principle. Like even if you're a fan of, US and American history, you'll know that a lot of the founding fathers were in their early 20s, late teens. Like Nathaniel Hale, I think he was 21 when he was hung.
Mm.
So like even just the notion that of young people getting involved in like their autonomy and starting to question authority and to decide that they want to have a certain degree of readiness and preparation. This is just a continuation of like an American tradition and a human tradition. It's as old as time itself, or
Yeah.
as old as humanity itself.
Yeah. And I would dare to assume that there are people, and I know that there are people who see your group and they say, just a bunch of kids. What do they know? They're defying the status quo. Why don't y'all just go to school? Yeah. Why don't y'all just go work jobs and be productive? Why y'all basically running around being the blue hairs of the world? And yeah, nothing against people who choose to have blue hair, but there's this stereotype that comes with it. And I wonder, I suppose, what do you feel like the end game is for you and the group? Like where do you feel like it has to be before you feel like, okay, we accomplished the mission. The goal is we've reached our goal.
Right. So when I started this, there was I had no idea where I was going to go. I've just been along for the ride in my own ways and using this as like an outlet to explore various ideas as they come along. I don't really feel like there is a final end stage, end point. Rather, I want it to have the ability to grow and respond to. I want it to become what it needs to become to meet certain challenges when they come up. So I feel like there was a time where during the pandemic and right after the pandemic, there was like this huge influx where we had tons of people all over the country wanting to put together range days because they were looking for like in-person community. And we really filled that need for a while. And we were happy to do it. The fact that we had tons of like area coordinators putting on events all over the country. The logistics of coordinating that, I don't wish that upon anyone. But there was a time where that was our main thing. And I think it served a purpose and it met a need at the time that it did. But now that people are kind of outside again and people have kind of broken off into their, or we've helped people meet their friends and they've kind of broken off into their own little friend groups, like more power to everyone who's done that. Then I think our next phase was providing like focused training, like focused skills-based training, primarily in Texas, but like in a few other locations as well. And it was kind of that, time period of just building up like really like good like competency for new shooters and putting on those classes, and that was great for a time. But now I think that we're maturing as a group. Our goal is to get into, or maturing as a company rather, is leaning more into mass messaging in terms of promoting that people should be doing this themselves without necessarily needing to be a card-carrying member of our group or needing to attend an event in Houston to be considered, aligned with what we're trying to do here. Mm-hmm. So we're working with more like competition shooters, trying to make the merchandise that we make carry like broader messaging, because we've been very influenced by like the streetwear brands of the 90s, like Supreme, the Hundreds, Stussy, like all these like brands that put like really punchy messaging that kind of lets people know that there are other people who see the world the way that they do. Mm-hmm. And then seeing the stuff that we make on like competition shooters, and other people are just training in general.
So would you say that this is the direction you guys have been trying to go? Because I know you kind of alluded to it, that there's two Army Friends, where it started and where it is going, not necessarily even where it is today. Is that where you're trying to go? Like what is that existential shift in, I suppose, mindset or mission, or where did the path branch so that where are you headed?
Yeah, so I think right now, I think it's kind of a complicated question to answer.
Sorry.
No, it's perfect. Because it forces me to really like think and put these things into words. I feel like I have this vision of what it looks like, but I don't necessarily communicate that out to people very often. It's kind of like we're at a point where we had a lot of like heavy infrastructure, like heavy things that we're building in terms of like, a training operation, just tons of people, when it can be easier to be more nimble and more light when you are focusing on, broader, like mass community appeal. I'm not sure if that's going to make a lot of sense, but over the next couple of weeks, I think you'll be able to see a shift to doing like mostly range days in Houston with like the known people, but you'll also see a lot of new people who have like reach and influence, and people who specialize in doing these things kind of coming into our community in a more digital sense. So I feel like we're kind of shifting from like a lot of focus on like the in-person stuff to like really connecting and building a community and network of people online. That kind of supports like the things we're doing in Houston. I know it's probably not going to sound like it makes a lot of sense, but I would just urge everyone who's listening, just stay tuned. You've probably seen like a dip in like social media activity from our end. It's because we're working on like the thing that I'm talking about right now.
I feel you. Yeah. So hopefully people are able to see that as things progress. And of course, if the vision changes, or if the path to the end goal kind of shifts, maybe they'll see that as well. Because that's kind of I suppose a question that I've had, is where a lot of the people that I've communicated with and kind of broke bread with have been both Black and in the 2A community. So in a sense, like Black 2A folks. And I have plenty of friends who are not in those categories either way. However, I know AYF has not traditionally been heavy in its Black population. And if it is, please correct me right now. Is that part of the idea of being able to shift more into a digital space where you're able to reach those people that perhaps haven't always shown up for range days and whatnot? Not to say specifically just Black shooters, but the people that you would like to be able to reach. Is it just a little bit easier in a digital way, or How would you say?
I think so. I feel like one thing that I'm noticing is that there is um, part of our goal was to like kind of bridge that gap between like the Black 2A community and other people, but realizing that there are just questions and challenges that I haven't solved like
What are these
myself.
challenges? And you said other people. Are you referring to, let's say, Black 2A interacting with
Yeah,
LGBT or Asian shooters?
so I would say that like there was a lot of there's always been a lot of diversity at our events, which means like there were plenty of Asian Americans, white Americans, Latino Americans who I've met through Arm Your Friends. So I would say like there's always been like a pretty fair amount of diversity at our events. It hasn't been like specifically like just black shooters who come to our events.
Sure, yeah.
Um,
Which
but
I suppose it shouldn't be, being that Arm Your Friends mission is not just to select a very specific type of
right.
Second Amendment loving person.
So what I'm trying to say about like where we're trying to bring in more digital creators is one working with like various creators, like black creators, like content creators who are also shooters, and shooters of various demographics to work with them to kind of like promote what we're trying to get people to do, which is go out and train and to meet other like-minded people and to go train with them. So the goal isn't just to say, you know, we're targeting specific people. It's targeting people who feel like they align with the mission of inspiring other people to go train. That's like what we mean by, you know, people who are bringing into our community. Um, I feel like it's easier in some ways because I've noticed that there are a lot of like black 2A people who live in places that kind of feel random. Like you might talk to someone who's in Michigan or Tennessee.
Right.
And there's that like common thread of, you know, we want to work with these people, but under the current like infrastructure of Arm Your Friends, there's not really much we can do at all for like a shooter who's just in Michigan by themselves.
Right.
But
In some cornfield in Idaho. Or,
right.
Right.
It's, you know, people are just kind of out there in the world. But by taking our new approach, which is, you know, partnering with them specifically to at least like get the message out there that like they should be putting on their own events and that they should be meeting up with other people and to really cast a spotlight onto what they're doing, that increases the likelihood that they can build up their own local, smaller in-person communities of handfuls of people who are going to go train with them. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the shift that we're looking into for building up our online presence or
Okay,
building
so-
up our online community versus the kind of in-person infrastructure that.
So kind of like satellite campuses in a way.
Yeah, but it'll look less formal than that.
Sure.
Because we've tried the, you know, nationwide organizing campaigns of, you know, having multiple range days running at the same time, and we got to a point where we realized that that wasn't going to be sustainable for like our goals.
Yeah, people need autonomy if that's going to work. They have to do it literally themselves.
So rather than trying to tell people that like range days are coordinated like over across this wide spread of, you know, the whole country by like a central group in Houston, like we kind of got away from that. So that's where we're focused on like supporting individual content creators, shooters, to kind of get the message that, you know, training is a lifestyle and that they should be encouraging other people to train as well.
So let's touch on this because I love what you said there, but let's touch on this. I like the name. Arm Your Friends. I think it's like super straightforward. When I first saw it, I was like, who? What? That's such a strange name. But I've grown to appreciate just the simplicity in what it means for me, per se, even though I'm not in the group, I'm not affiliated other than this conversation. What does it mean for you? Like when you or whoever was in that brain trust formulated the name, what was the original meaning and what does it mean today if it's not the same thing?
Yeah, I think it means, I think the original context in which it was said was I was out with my friends around that time of the George Floyd protests, and we were looking at like how the city was like a mess, how there were just tons of police officers just out there kind of blocking off like the central business district, like clearly they're sending the message that we're here to protect these billion-dollar skyscrapers that, you know, are in Houston. Then we looked at like all the stuff that was going on. We realized we're looking at the data for like police response times, and we're looking at the information about, you know, the chances of you getting like having a negative police encounter. And we're not even talking about if you're doing something wrong. We're talking about if you call the police and something were to happen to you as an accident as a result of you being like a black person calling the police in an emergency and hoping that like the police are going to come like save you. So those are a few of the thoughts going on in our heads. And then we said, considering the state of everything, considering the fact that their focus is over here, the response rates are like that, the world is in this amount of chaos, and history looks like one way, your best bet for ensuring your own safety and protection is to arm your friends, to not like face the world alone, to not try to say, oh, all these problems are isolated. No, arm your friends, like build a community, like learn how to shoot a firearm and train with it often. And then make sure that your friends are ready to go in an emergency. Like, and it's kind of that simple. If you want someone to be safer, arm them and train with them, and then be a friend to them.
Sounds
and
fair.
I feel like that part of the mission has never changed.
Yeah, that sounds good. I like the idea, just because when I found community in the Second Amendment world, in the gun world, things changed. My ideas and standards changed, and they continue to evolve. What I thought was good or fine, it was challenged. The iron was sharpened against sticks and stones, and sometimes iron. And yeah, why not arm your friends? I mean, if they're your friends, right? Why wouldn't you?
It's kind of hard to disagree with our name.
Right. It's not like anarcho, burn it down, hate the blue. You know, it doesn't have any of those things in the name.
I think one of my favorite taglines about what everyone should be is you should identify and name yourself based around who you are for and what you want to do for the people that you are for, rather than by defining yourself by who you're against, or even if you do have like some enemy in mind. Like I could bag, like there's a group that, or even in your values, you should strive to show like who you are including, not who you're excluding, who you want to attract, not who you want to repel. So that's why I have like issues with like groups like the Proud Boys, or like groups like Patriot Front that like are out here showing like kind of inherently that they want like only a specific type of person to be welcome in their vision of the type of group you join, kind of like, or get involved with, kind of expresses your like vision for what the future looks like, the way that you think the future is going to look. So if you join something like the Proud Boys or Patriot Front, or you know, some group like that, like those, or who are those guys who are burning the tiki torches out in what are those guys? It's essentially a Klan rally where someone was killed. I can't remember, but
you're talking about back in Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlottesville. I can't remember what those.
Charlottesville, excuse me. Yeah, I was actually living in Virginia, and at that time, Charlottesville was like 40 minutes away, which is crazy.
So a bunch of those people completely define themselves as like by who they are like excluding, and it kind of shows like their dismal like vision for what the world can be. And I feel like what we should all strive to do is like present a vision of the world that like is inclusive and is hopeful and brings more people in. We want more people to participate in the Second Amendment rather than few of them. And we want more people to feel safe, not just a specific subset of people. And we think when we say arm your friends, it makes everyone safer when everyone is armed and trained and competent.
So I can very much appreciate the path that you just went down there. I maybe have about two more questions before I'll probably run out of questions. And one of those would be, what is your personal opinions or beefs? Do you have any personal opinions or beefs with the current state of law enforcement or law enforcement? Have you had any issues with them growing up? Any run-ins, or do you just have this nebulous view of the state-sponsored machine that oftentimes fails society at a fundamental level, as well as producing certain heroic moments that should not be denied? And I think we can both agree on those certain moments. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think the best way to talk about my views when it comes to the state of law enforcement is appreciating the nuance of what goes into the present. So like I consider myself, like many of us in the Second Amendment community, to be a student of history. So whenever I talk about anything, I don't tell me about 2022. Tell me about like 1922. Tell me about 1822. Tell me like how we got to where we are today, to like inform like where we are. If you look at the history of like American policing, it comes from like some very nasty places, like just a lot. And that's not to say that every single police department is inherently nasty, but it's important that when you think about like any organization and the tactics it uses, people are a byproduct of like their history as well. And that kind of informs like what their future outlook is. That's to say there are plenty of people who join law enforcement for the right reason. But if you are a person who is trying to do the right thing, it is very easy to get swept up into doing the wrong thing very easily. So I just want to acknowledge that. Sure, are there some police officers who believe that they're trying to do their best? Yeah, absolutely. But at the end of the day, if you look at the issues that are most important to the 2A community, which is like autonomy, self-defense, being able to, have the tools that you need to like protect yourself. Like, sure, if you're a good cop and you believe you're a good cop and you're doing your job and you break no laws and you're out there filing police reports when your coworkers are abusing their power and you're out there testifying in court against your coworkers when they abuse their power, all power to you. Continue to hold your teammates to like a higher standard. Make sure that like when they do crimes, they go to jail for it just like the rest of us do. When they kill people, they get charged like the rest of us do. You're not hiding. Like if you do that, like that's great. However, my perspective acknowledges that I don't think the smartest plan for me and the smartest plan for me to recommend to people is that they trust their safety to any police department. It's just not a winning strategy. Like we're all human, and being a human means you experience fear, anxiety, fatigue, bias. Everyone has their own internal biases. And trusting the lives of your family, trusting the lives of your parents, your kids, your neighbors to some person who you've never met because you called like the customer service line. That's a really bad bet that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. Like I'm not a father yet. I don't have any kids. That's not where I am in life. But I'm not leaving my child alone in a room with a priest. I'm not leaving my child alone with an individual teacher. I'm not leaving my child alone with an individual doctor. I'm not leaving my child, I'm not trusting enough of any individual human with individual human weaknesses, problems, fatigue, anxiety, stresses, and biases, like with the things that are most important to me, meaning my life, my family, and my property. And I think that's where you should evaluate my perspective rather than me being against anyone.
Yeah.
Not against anyone. I just wouldn't. I like my neighbors. I think if I wave to my neighbors every day, I'm not inviting them in for coffee until I really vet them.
That is it's a powerful statement, and I think many people would be hard pressed to disagree with at least the majority of what you said. I know we've talked in the past and we've said that AYF is kind of, in addition to being a clothing brand, which you guys have some cool clothes, some drip.
Thank you.
And I expect a shirt in the mail. I'm just playing, but my question is, we've talked in the past, and you said like, hey, we're also a technology company, and I was like, what? what are you saying, dude? Explain that.
Yeah. So one thing that we've been working on, and we're kind of spinning it off into another group, or into another operation that is kind of, the timeline is pushed out until 2023 on this, is we built a training platform from scratch, like in-house code, out-of-house code.
That's your expertise.
Yeah. So my background is in IT, which is kind of broader than specifically what we've built, which is a web platform. That would make it easier for people to get into training classes. So like we've had a lot of experience putting on like events and training classes, and we realized that there wasn't really something that did what we needed it to do. The thing about building software is software comes with its own challenges. Building websites from scratch is no easy task. So for the time being, we've actually put the pin in that specific project because we actually think we found a better use for it that's not in-house immediately. And we think ranges and other training facilities are going to be able to get more use out of it than like just us. Mm-hmm. So we're actually going to be, we're working on providing it to like other ranges so that like more in-person infrastructure style operations can use it.
Do you feel like and this is going to branch into a secondary question, and I like the idea of mobilizing the power of the World Wide Web, Joe Biden's internet, to allow people to learn the necessary skills of self-defense with a firearm, which is the most effective tool to defend yourself. That's just what it is. And that's why I support 2A the way I do. It's just the most effective tool right now. If there's a better tool, I will support that tool. But I appreciate your forward thinkingness in a sense to mobilize the power of what we have to kind of revolutionize a rather stale industry. And I'm talking to you, everybody in the industry. It's stale. It's kind of it's scared of innovation in a sense, because a lot of the people who are at the top are what I would call like boomer FUDs, if you're familiar with the term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understand that.
They see the red dot and they're just like, you're testing your life to technology. And it's like, sir, it's super effective. Ask the best shooters in the world. And I love to see the dichotomy of like the shift of the guys who are the best and the brightest, and even some of the older cats moving to the new stuff. Like, okay, AR-15 is amazing. Can we make it a little bit better? And you see SIG come out with some stuff, and I'm like, that thing's heavy, but I like what you're doing. And then you have some more SIG stuff where they have the fire control units in their guns, and then right. So for modularity, and so we're moving forward, but it's almost at a snail's pace. Like we should have been here like 10 years ago when it comes to the tools that we use.
I feel like on that specific issue, I think that's a really fascinating one. If there were, it's kind of like the same thing that you notice in like the economy at large. Sure. If you work in like software or you work in like, big IT, there are only a few companies that actually build anything that actually gets used by other big players. Mm-hmm. So like SAP, I don't know if are you familiar with SAP? Mm-hmm. So like if you're like SAP, you've been the user interface looks like it was designed in like
It's
the late
bad.
80s. It's horrible. But the reason why it's used is because it works. Everyone knows how it works. It's reliable and it's
Industry
not going to
standard.
break.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's industry standard. So like the reason why they make so much money is because they're building something to spec that they know that they can sell for like $1 billion. SIG isn't necessarily out here trying to build the best rifle for like, specific use cases. They're trying to build something that they know that they can sell multi-billion dollars worth of to the government eventually. But if there were like more smaller, ambitious boutique shops, which I think we're going to see more of as 3D printing rises and people
Mhm.
can prototype in 3D printing and then send off to machining later, I think we're at the verge of having like a renaissance of like new, reliable specialty rifles. Um, yeah, I think that we're like the next 10, 20 years, we're going to see tons of that.
Right. Now, applying this to your new technology situation, do you feel that the boomer folks who own gun ranges, and I'm sure not everyone is, but there's so many that are, do you feel like they'll adopt your system as in like, oh, this is just another way to teach, or
I think that remains to be seen. I don't like to see myself as a fortune teller really. I like to see myself as um, someone who runs a lot of experiments.
sure?
Like that's kind of the phase I am like in my life as well. Like where I have the bandwidth to like experiment with like different tools and ideas and skills and like things, and I'll build things until they work. I think the older generation that currently owns the ranges is eventually going to retire. And then once they give way, the true boomer generation that has the money to like literally own the rights to a shooting range, they're eventually going to become Gen Xers, and then they're eventually going to become millennials. And in 20 years, by the time that millennials are the owners of like these acreage like shooting ranges or even indoor facilities, whatever, um, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on making sure that things are streamlined across the internet.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it's a matter of time. Um, just if you look at like the potential of just social media right now, you're even seeing like more gun ranges, more training operations getting on TikTok. And eventually they're going to need ways to ensure that like they're pulling in the people from TikTok and social media into their ranges and into classes, so that they're actually, retaining people.
Yeah. I know that there are plenty of educational platforms, say like Kojabi is one, if you're familiar, Masterclass, and others that perhaps aren't 2A friendly. Is that your concern, and maybe why you didn't go with them? If
Oh,
maybe if we're envisioning correctly that you want to have a
so
teaching platform.
yeah, by teaching platform, what we've built so that we could use it is a tool that connects people to in-person training with instructors.
So like a live streaming platform in a sense.
No, like this is the tool that you use to get into the exact class that you like want to take with an instructor.
Okay.
Because
So like
there's what?
so like a market.
Yeah, yeah. The true term is a like platform when it comes to software tools like this. But we
Sure.
essentially built a platform that helps students get into and find the classes that they want to take. Because there are a lot of people who, they go to like the website of some advanced instructor, and they see that they only offer, super high speed carbine classes, and that's great because we want certain instructors who have that skill set to like focus on teaching that skill set. But if there are uh, there are a lot of prerequisite classes that people should probably take and have equal access to if they really want to, get the most value out of taking those classes at the same point. So
Hmm.
creating a way for people to find the classes that they want to be taking or that they really need to be taking in one easy to find like platform That's what we've been kind of building out, and we're tweaking it a little bit, but I think we're going to spin it out in a different way than our first experiment, the beginning of the next year.
So my second question, because I think that's really cool to be able to have a place where I can go and say, hey, I'm just going to hop in. But my second to last question is, hey, do you feel that AYF, perhaps some of the name association with that, where people still have some strange ideas, do you feel like people might have an issue with saying like, oh, I'm going to jump on and support these guys?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. I mean, we welcome the support of anyone who wants to support us, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to spend the rest of my time doing this trying to win over people who had their brains fried by Alex Jones, and like who got their brains fried during COVID, who don't understand that more political views exist than Donald Trump, the hero, and Joe Biden, the communist. Like, I'm not interested in those people.
Sure.
So like, that's the worldview of the person. Like, have fun with that. Like, there's more to this world in the minds of people under the age of like 25 than like Donald Trump is our savior and Joe Biden is like what? Like Stalin? Like, grow up.
You're thinking long game, because I would say there's a strong majority of people who have strength in the 2A marketplace that maybe they don't think that those exact thoughts, but they are very cautious and very selective about what they do.
Yeah, so those people, I am highly confident, if the only way that you can brand your firearms training company is Punisher skulls, you're not going to exist in 10 years. Or actually, no, you will exist in 10 years. Just everyone who you're going to train is old. And that's cool if like that's what you want. But like if you want like the next generation of like new shooters, and you don't want to be competing over the same like barrel of people who like wear Punisher like skull t-shirts like everywhere, like you're welcome to go compete, but like that's not necessarily who we're automatically after. We're not competing over the same people.
Okay.
Like the people we've had the most success with are people who look at that and say, ew. And that's like really who we're after. And that describes a lot of people. Like there's enough people in the 2A community who are serving that specific like cultural niche. And I have no interest in changing our brand or our history to be more accommodating to people who shit their pants when they hear Antifa. Like go read a book, you know? Like we're not like an Antifa group. We're not Antifa. We're not leftist. We're not some political ideology focused like operation. But if what's been said on the internet like scares you, go back inside, Grandpa. Like it's time for bed, you know?
Oof. Well, on that note, how can people find you in the organization?
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, anywhere on the internet, pretty much, even TikTok, at Arm Your Friends. So that's ARMYOURFRIENDS. Arm Your Friends.
And I think you guys have a website directly, right?
Yeah, it's armyourfriends.com.
Simple
and
as
you'll
that.
be able to find that website. Yeah, we're lucky. We got all the names for everything before anyone else could get any of our names for anything.
It can get expensive if you mess around and wait too long. So thank you so much for coming on Flight. I definitely appreciate you spending some time and kind of letting people know what you guys are up to, setting the record straight on some things, and of course, giving us a little glimpse into kind of what the future holds. If you have anything else you want to share, go ahead and stop me now.
No, I think that's it. Just get at us on social media for updates, and shoot us a message or an email if you have any questions about what we do. And yeah, stay tuned.
Thanks, Flight. Appreciate you, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. And until next time, keep it costly.